The poster depicts the Tower House at 30th and State, Concordia's oldest building and one of its most prominent landmarks. It was built in 1850 by Robert Ferries, who may have been Wisconsin's first dentist. Other wealthy residents followed, changing Highland Boulevard, then Prairie Avenue in this 1885 photo, to a street in 1900 lined with the mansions of such notables as A.O. Smith, the Usingers, and the Vilters.
Highland was called Sauerkraut Boulevard at one point. It was very German, extremely German, and at that turn of the century, you came and you got into many different things. They were quite entrepreneurial. They made their fortune in a lot of different areas.
The two largest mansions on Highland, Concordia's northern boundary, were built by the two sons of beer baron Captain Frederick Pabst, one in a neoclassical style, the second in French Renaissance revival, now housing one of many social service agencies in the neighborhood. The Beaux Arts style residence, often called the Lion House, was built nearby in 1897. Down the street, this 1897 Queen Anne style home, now a bed and breakfast. Unlike some of its neighbors, most of the original elaborate interior remains.
This house was built by Jacob Jacoby, who was the architect for William Manigault. And William Manigault was a miller. He milled grains and later on was a brewer. And what turned me on was the housing stock itself, just the high quality of what's actually in this house, the original fixtures, the original woodwork, and in my mind, the vision I had of what it could be. Our house is blessed because it's got most of its original furnishings or the fixtures and the woodwork, where you don't find that in most cases.
Wisconsin Avenue, the southern boundary of Concordia, also had its share of mansions. Among its prominent residents, industrialist Henry Harnischweger, who built this home in 1905. Other houses in the 3100 block illustrate the variety of architectural styles once common along the avenue. Wells Street was also a grand residential thoroughfare in the late 1800s. This German Renaissance revival castle was built in 1891. This Victorian Gothic home dates back to 1879. This former mansion at 30th and Wells will soon be the fourth bed and breakfast in the neighborhood.
Well, we purchased a house that was quite a fixer-upper. It needed everything from the staircase to windows to the floors to everything you can imagine. All the fireplace mantles were gone. And we bought it at the end of '93, and we've been fixing it up ever since. And we're just about complete. We will be opening as a bed and breakfast this summer. Our house was built in 1886 by or for David W. Howie, who was a coal merchant. And then we purchased the home next door, thinking we'll probably want to expand into an inn next door. And it was built by or for Lynn Boyd Benton, who was an entrepreneur. He was in many different things. And then Frederick Miller of Miller Brewery bought it for his daughter, Clara Miller. Miller Brewery calls Clara Miller the girl in the moon, so we say we've got the girl in the moon's house.
Between Highland and Wisconsin, from 27th to 35th, you'll find hundreds of other homes of many different styles and sizes. Many mansions became rooming houses. Apartments appeared in 1907. Concordia has among the highest concentrations of apartment buildings in the city. The West End Community Association has played a major role in the revitalization of near West Side neighborhoods that have had their share of problems.
But until we dealt with the problems of urban challenges, urban decay and deterioration, we couldn't have the neighborhood that we have now. It is not West End staff. Staff is there to assist with the residents, but it has been actually a very strong resident, business owners' involvements, the landlords, the police, everybody really working to address the problems and the challenges we had in the area to make it the vital area that it is and real revitalization.
Revitalization also came from the institution that gave the neighborhood its name, Concordia College, built in 1883. The campus moved to Mequon in 1983. Now the buildings house educational and other services for Milwaukee's Native American community. 27th Street became the main commercial strip in the 1920s. Now, along with 35th, the western Concordia boundary, it's a major target for change.
Having now empowered residents and you know, making these neighborhoods viable, I think that our work is now to meet the greater needs of the area, which is around economic and commercial development.
This neighborhood has gone through many changes over the years, not all of them positive. But many of today's homeowners consider this area a secret that more people should know about. Getting out the word about the Concordia neighborhood is the goal of an annual tour of historic buildings, which will take place in June.
Now the houses that were once boarded up are prized and completed, and we get calls, are there any houses for sale in Concordia? And they're not right now, but it's exploded.
We will always have a mix of incomes and races and that based on just the housing stock that we have here, and I think we strive to work towards that, to keeping that diverse mix.
So we're trying to find ways that we can interact with our neighbors in the apartment buildings and try to do things that are positive. So many people run away from the city and moved out to the suburbs to try to get away from the very thing that we're kind of embracing here. We've got problems with crime occasionally, and we're trying to address that as a group and going out and doing things. We believe that if we keep on trying to be an influence, we can see changes, and it'll benefit everybody that lives here.
I'm Officer Frank Arenas.
And I'm Officer Elizabeth Ibarra. Los Protectores.
Los Protectores started in 1996, a traffic safety education effort aimed primarily at the Southside Hispanic community. The program helped people apply for a driver's license, taught traffic rules and regulations. But officers learned that many people were also losing their licenses due to unpaid traffic or non-traffic fines, often because of a fear of municipal court or continued confusion with the system. That led to the Driver's License Reinstatement Program.
If you had a license, you lost it, it's not the end of the world. Okay? If you want to get your license back, it's just a matter of coming forward and asking for help.
These are not people who lost their licenses. They were going through a job orientation training program. Officer Arenas took the opportunity to talk about the importance of a driver's license in getting and keeping a job.
And I think you probably realize that that's a big problem with a lot of people. They're good workers, they're conscientious workers, they want to get to the job, but there's no bus that goes there. There's no car that drives, nobody who will drive them there. So how do they get to that job? They lose out.
Hoping to prevent others from losing out, the Common Council recently voted to accept a state grant which helps bring the city's African-American community into the Safe Driver program. That effort is led by Officer Leon Staples.
Talk to them and advise them that under our program you have to come in with, say if you owe $400, they now can come in with $200 paid towards their fine, and then they have up to 90 days to take care of the balance of $200. But in the interim of as soon as they pay down, they go before the judge, and the judge usually reinstates their driving privilege while they're paying off their fines.
In order to get the program's message out to those on the north side who may have lost a license, Officer Staples is meeting with residents and handing out flyers.
That flyer is distributed to, like I say, employment agencies, community-based organizations. We've done everything but put them up in, say, supermarkets on, public bulletin boards. Mm-hmm. But we'll hand them out to the agencies, and then by word of mouth, usually when we help somebody, we'll now go back and tell a friend or a relative, and hey, if they got those problems, we'll hear from them too.
Felicia Tucker saw one of Leon's flyers, made the appointment to see him the next day. Her problems began with a traffic accident in 1998. Her inability to afford payments to an insurance company resulted in a damage judgment, and her license was revoked.
Before I had met Leon, I
I guess I could say I had no interest in trying to get my license because I didn't think that I can get in without having to pay all this money at one time. But once I had met with Leon and found out that I can pay, so much, and then I could pay the rest within a 90-day time frame, I said, okay, that's for me, let me go for it, because it is important to have your license.
While the officer who helps with the paperwork doesn't go to municipal court, the judges are very aware of the driver's license reinstatement program, are in support of it, and will work with those who make the effort.
I mean, the judges are there, they'll bend over backwards to help you out. They'll set up a payment plan for you. They'll, if you have difficulty making the payments, all you do is call there and they'll tell you, well, okay, we'll forgive you this month, but you got to make next month's payment. They're very flexible.
Well, the judges are the ones that we're working with on this here, and once they see they have that letter from us, myself or Officer Arenas saying that they're here under the driver's license reinstatement program, the judge will know that we're working with them to help straighten out their fines and to get things, to get their license reinstated, and so they'll work with them that way. I say they would rather you to come into court and set up a payment plan and straighten their fines out that way. I say they don't want to lock you up.
Being on the fixed income that I'm on, I was afraid that, okay, like I said, I couldn't pay all that money, but, there is a way you can pay so much and then pay the rest, later on, within a 90-day time frame. So I do suggest that, meet Leon, give him a call.
While the city's Los Protectores traffic safety program is currently aimed at the Hispanic and African American communities, it is open to any Milwaukee resident.
Each one of you can at least kind of spread the word out too that, hey, there's somebody there who can help you out or try to help you out. I don't make a promise that I can get it done for you, but I do tell you that, look, I will look up your problem, I will explain it to you, and I will lay it out in steps. 1, 2, 3, here's what you got to do.
I really think it's an outstanding program, and it's, it's kind of like a two-edged sword where, you guys are writing the tickets, and now you're out here helping people. Well, yes, that's what we're doing. I mean, it's another way of helping the communities understand that, you can't ride around without a driver's license. It's a privilege in this state to have a license.
The poster depicts North Milwaukee's former Village Hall on 35th Street just south of Villard. The building is seen on the left in this photo from around 1903. North Milwaukee's downtown was Villard Avenue, growing from a handful of businesses in 1897 to about 30 10 years later, most within a block or two of 35th Street. Stork's Hardware has been at 34th and Villard for 77 years, since 1923.
Well, at that time, Villard Avenue was basically a dirt road. There was wooden sidewalks. It went just about to 43rd Street or Sherman Boulevard, and that was the extent of it.
Oscar Stork had a brewery in Slinger when he decided to get into the hardware business. Bruce Sutherland is his grandson, the third generation to operate the hardware store. Bruce began working these crowded aisles when he was 14, learning the business from his grandfather.
He got into it with my grandmother. They lived upstairs here on 34th and Villard, and they were open, as he says, they were always open. They might have had the doors locked, but they were always open. People would go upstairs, knock on the door.
Like Villard Avenue, Stork Ace Hardware has seen its ups and downs, such as during the war years.
Everything was at a shortage. You couldn't get gasoline, kerosene. We sold chickens and eggs here. We sold everything, stovepipe. But and through the 50s and 60s, it was a pretty good area. We had there was one article that was written that said if there was ever a nuclear holocaust, Villard Avenue would survive. It had a cobbler, it had shoe stores, clothing, grocery stores, 2 banks, post office. Everything was right on Villard Avenue, as well as a hardware store.
But times changed, and Villard Avenue went through some tough times. Sutherland thought about leaving the area, as many others did, but he did not.
I guess we just wanted to persevere. We'd been in business so long here. People had known that Stork Ace Hardware had been here for a long, long time. And I guess since my grandfather and I were very close, I just took it upon myself as being to carry the torch, so to speak.
The corner of what is now Titonia and Villard is where North Milwaukee began its career as Schwartzburg after a pioneer farmer. The new community was overwhelmingly German. The former Grace Lutheran Church on 34th Street was organized by the Russian or Volga Germans, one of the city's least known ethnic groups. Railroads put North Milwaukee on the map. By the 1870s, two major railroad lines from Milwaukee to Minneapolis and Green Bay were among the busiest in the state. The crossing of the lines imposed a huge X on the area, bordered by Congress to Silver Spring, 27th Street to Sherman Boulevard, and made it a major industrial center. Some say it still is.
We boast often that the north side of Milwaukee is home to 2 Fortune 100 companies and 7 Fortune 500 companies that are in manufacturing. So we think we're still pretty much an industrial community.
The Northwest Side Community Development Corporation has been a catalyst for development in the North Milwaukee neighborhood for 17 years.
In the early stages, they were more or less a real estate monitor, and they would take abandoned buildings like the one that we're sitting in, and they would help find reuses for them. Now we're more of a catalyst. We support business entrepreneurship, helping companies retain themselves in this part of town, and helping find new companies that are looking to grow and develop on the northwest side of the city.
In 1893, the Wisconsin Bridge and Iron Company became the area's first major employer, building a new plant on 35th Street. Lakeside Bridge and Steel and E.R. Wagner metal stampings were among those that followed, and by 1915 it was one of the area's densest industrial districts. The 1970s brought hard times to the area. Business and industry found it difficult to compete. Wisconsin Bridge closed its doors in 1983. But other businesses are very much alive, such as the Northern Railcar Corporation in the old Lakeside building. With Northwest CDC help, a dozen self-supporting businesses now operate out of a former abandoned building at 32nd and Villard.
I think that what is said to this particular community is that you could do business on Villard. You could do business in a small neighborhood like this and reach out to the entire city. So I think it was very important for people to see that.
Like North Milwaukee, Villard Avenue is on its way back. Working with the city and state, merchants approved a business improvement tax district to pay for streetscape improvements, repaving of sidewalks and the street. The Business Association provides help to new merchants and manufacturers, and there's a renewed commitment to the area.
And now we're actually pleased to report that there's a lot of interest for companies and small businesses buying on Villard. We've recently sold 4 buildings on Villard Avenue in as many months. And that suggests that there's a pulse back on the street, and we're real pleased about that. So I think that's the difference. There wasn't a pulse 10 or 12 years ago, and there's definitely one now.
We just got a new Osco on Titonian and Villard. But we'd like to get some of the smaller shops, some of the specialty shops, that people will have to come to this area to get to shop here. So that's where we're at right now. It's an area that has seen the good times and seen the low times, and fortunately it's coming back up again. So we're real happy.
North Milwaukee homes represent practically every stage of the architectural history of the city. It has the greatest concentration of pre-1930s houses outside the central city. Like other neighborhoods, North Milwaukee works on its strengths as it moves into the future.
We build on our assets, and the assets are the people, the young and the old, the new. It's a great neighborhood to be in. We think that the northwest side of Milwaukee is really viable, and people who know about us know that there's a lot of business and commerce out here.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Milwaukee Common Council, I want to welcome John Gurda to the Nerve Center of Milwaukee City Government, the Common Council chambers of Milwaukee City Hall. Without question, John Gurda is Milwaukee's premier historian. His most recent book, The Making of Milwaukee, clearly shows that there is much more to our beloved city's legacy than beer, bratwurst, and motorbikes. John Gurda hopes that people come away from his new book, The Making of Milwaukee, with a sense of the richness of Milwaukee's past. John Gurda, in his book, has woven a story which has thousands of branches and side trips. He hopes that those who read his book will move through time and emerge somewhere else with a sense of connectedness with the past.
John Gurda was honored for his service and contributions to the city as aldermen met for the first time in the year 2000. He used the opportunity to take a historical look back at local government at the turn of the last century.
In January of 1900, this building was barely 4 years old. Its layout was somewhat different than what you know today. The galleries on both sides above you here were open so that more Milwaukeeans could observe their aldermen at work. There were 46 of those aldermen back in 1900, 2 per ward, serving 2-year terms at a time when the city of Milwaukee's population was less than half of its current population. City Hall was then by far the tallest building on Milwaukee's skyline with no close competitors. It was a towering statement of the importance of local government in this community, but the character of that government was somewhat less than sterling. Milwaukee's mayor in 1900 was a man named David Stewart Rose, who was originally a small-town lawyer from southwestern Wisconsin, and whose campaign slogan was conventions, celebrations, and a live town. Back in 1900, and during that era, back under all the time Rosie, as he was known, prostitution thrived, especially in the block between here and the Milwaukee River. Gambling dens multiplied and all-night saloons were common. On this council floor, back in 1900, the burning issue was the streetcar franchise. The company's lobbyists were much in evidence during and before the voting, which took place in this chamber behind locked doors. Ooh. The result was a victory for the utility and an assumption that more than a few palms had been greased. Enough was finally enough. Grand jury investigations began in 1901 and continued for nearly 8 years. By 1905, those juries had returned a total of 276 indictments. The grand juries helped to at least stem the flow of graft in Milwaukee, but something more constructive was afoot, and that was a reform movement spearheaded by the Socialist Party. Although its roots were heavily German, the Socialist Crusade appealed to a wide range of ethnic groups, including some Yankee reformers. Although its godfather was an intellectual named Victor Berger, the movement's strongholds were Milwaukee's working-class wards. Although they believed devoutly in the cooperative commonwealth, Milwaukee socialists were pragmatic to the core. They were so intent on building adequate public works that their colleagues in other cities called them sewer socialists. In 1910, Emil Seidel, who was a pattern maker by trade, became Milwaukee's first socialist mayor. He was followed by Dan Hone, a labor lawyer, from 1916 to 1940, and by Frank Zeidler, who was among many other things a surveyor from 1948 to 1960. Only rarely did they have working majorities on this council, but socialists on all levels of government set the tone of local government for many years in the 20th century. In the operating departments, figures like Charlie Whitnell, who was the chief architect of our park system, became legends in their own time. You don't have to be a socialist, you don't have to like socialist philosophy to like what the socialists and their allies accomplished here. I suggest that you look back as you look ahead to ideals that are both timeless and nonpartisan. As the Common Council convenes for the first time in the 21st century, it would be fitting to let the principles of the past light your way to a brighter future for all our citizens.